Hi, this is Tammy and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to go step by step through making a mother's journal. Even though this is a mother's journal, once you know the steps to making a journal, you can make any kind you want. So I will guide you through this and show you what I did with making this journal and the way that I chose to bind it, the pages to the cover. So this is the paper that I used to, it's cardstock that I used to do the cover with. I chose this one because it is a very thick cardstock. So here I already have the pages that I'm going to use assembled, and so I will show you how I put those together later, but right now I'm measuring that so I know how big I need to make the cover. And you actually can make the cover first and then cut your pages to fit that cover. Or you can do it the way I did it here and make the pages first and then cut your cover to fit the pages. It's really up to you, either way you want to do it. I actually have two signatures that I'm going to be putting in this book, so I want it to have a little bit of a spine and not just be flat so that those pages will fit in there. A signature is a group of pages that you put together and fold. So I have like 4 or 5 pages in each signature. And then when you fold those and stack them on top of each other, that makes one signature. And then I did that with that one, and then I did the other signature page with about the same number of pages, or at least the same thickness. And how thick it is matters for your spine. Your spine needs to be able to accommodate the thickness that you put in it. Keeping in mind that you're also going to add things to those pages that's going to make it bulkier. So sometimes it's really important to have a thick spine. So that's what I'm doing here, is measuring my cardstock to determine how wide I want it and also how thick I want that spine to be. And then I'll be cutting those and cutting that cardstock paper down to the size that I need it to be. So in what you're seeing now, I've already cut the length off of it, so what you see is how wide it's going to be, but it's not going to be quite that long, so I need to cut some off of the length of it. There are lots of different things that you can use as the book cover. You can actually use an old book. If it's the right size, you can take the pages out of it and use it as your cover. You just paint over it and decorate it, or cover over it with fabric, or however you want to do it. And things like that, I'll do another video on later that will show you some different options that you have for making the cover. But right now, this video is quite long, and so I really only have time, without making this too long, to show you one way of doing it. But this one way would work with any journal you want to make, unless it's a really thick one. And as I go through decorating this, keep in mind, I'm doing this with a mother in mind. But you can make a mother's journal with the child that she's going to give it to in mind, and decorate it according to that child and what you think that child might like. And so, for instance, if it were a boy, then I would do something more masculine with it, so that when she passes it on to him, he doesn't think it's too frilly. But this one that I'm making would actually work really well to pass on to a girl. Also keep in mind that as I go through it and decorate it, I am leaving a lot of pages untouched. And I do that so that the person who ends up getting this journal has plenty of room for journaling, because what that person does in this journal is more important than what I do to make it look cute. So they may want to do some of their own sketches in it. They may want to do some artwork in it. They may want to have things they want to add into it. And I don't want to have it cluttered with other things that makes it hard for them to find a spot to do what they want to do in it. So as you can see by those roses there on that paper beside the cardstock, I'm going to be using 2 napkins to cover this page, or the book cover. And the napkins are going to cover the front and the back of that cardstock. So I'll be showing you how I do that to make it just wrap around so that both are covered. And here what I'm showing you is how to bend the paper once you've decided how thick you want it, how to bend it to get that spine crease in there. And it's important that it be a nice sharp fold so that the book opens and closes easily. So that's what I'm doing there, is just pressing it as firmly as I can to make a good fold there. And that's another reason, if you're making a cover using one solid piece, that's another reason that it's important to have a sturdy piece of cardstock to do it with. So there are also things that you buy from the grocery store, or like the one of those that I made in the video before for the chicken keeper. The cover was made using a Mucinex medicine box. So you can choose anything you want to make it with, and preferably the spine would already have its own size there, but if it doesn't, you can cut that down still and still make that work by taping it back together once you get it the width that you want it. And here I'm making the other fold for the other side of the spine. And when I take that out, you'll see that it's a good spine, and you'll see how much distance I wanted. And it's really about 1/4 of an inch is how wide that spine will be. And that's enough to accommodate the pages that I put in there. So make sure that you press each side really good. And then once you get it pressed, open it back up and make sure that the ends where the book opens at, that they meet each other and one's not longer than the other. And if one is longer than the other, then you just mark where it needs to be cut at and cut the one that's too long. I want to say I really appreciate all the views and comments that I have gotten on my previous video about doing these. And I'm glad that there is such an interest in it, and that so many people are asking for things that I hadn't even done yet. So I will be doing some others to show different ways and different styles of books. But I think that a mother's journal is an important one to have. So if you have a daughter who's a mother, or if you're a mother yourself and you would like to make one of these for your child, I think it's a great idea. It's a great thing to pass on to them. Maybe you make it and give it to them as part of their wedding gift, or when they move out to go to college, or when they step out into adult life, however it may be. Then they have that to look back on, and you can record so many different things about their childhood in there, and what it is about them that makes them special to you. It's just a great way to make that child feel special. So here I have already glued the napkin onto what is going to be the back side of the paper, or of the book. I went ahead and glued it. So that I could save a little bit of time because this video is long. But I am going to show you on this side what I did to glue that napkin down. So what I have in that bowl there is a mixture of Mod Podge in the matte finish and water. And the mixture is about 3 parts Mod Podge to 1 part water. So if you combine those two and stir them up really good, it should be about the thickness of most regular school glues. So brush it on there and make sure it's even. Don't leave any big clumps of glue there. And then put your napkin over it. The napkin, once you have torn the back layers off of it, and this one had 2 layers that had to be removed before I got down to this top layer. And you do have to remove those. But once you have done that, then the napkin is pretty fragile. So even though I am rubbing over it, I am doing it carefully because you could tear it easily if you're not careful with it. So you just rub it down, or sometimes even just patting it down to get it in place and to try to get the air bubbles out of it. And then you can lay it aside and let it air dry, or you can dry it with a hair dryer, which is what I did here. And the reason I like using a hair dryer is that as you're drying it, you can kind of manipulate it a little bit and get some of the wrinkles out if you want them out. That really wasn't what I was concerned about here because I like the look of the wrinkles in it, especially on this book or this journal. But you do need to get the air pockets out. So it gives you time to get the air pockets out before the glue underneath it actually dries. So you can get the air pocket out and press it down while it's still drying once it's to the stage that you can touch it and mess with it a little bit. So once I finished gluing that side down, I also glued the other side down, and you won't see that in the video because, again, I'm trying to save time on this and show you just one step instead of showing you every part of it because it's the same thing that you're doing again. So there it's dry and it's finished. And so then it's time to cut the excess napkin off. So just use your scissors and cut. There's a little bit on mine. There's a little bit down there at the bottom. I was trying to have the napkin down far enough that blue or green border that's around the napkin, I didn't want that on the cardstock because it wouldn't be all the way around it. So I left some hanging over on the bottom, and so you would need to cut that off if you have some on yours, and then also on the top. And at this stage, it's easier just to cut it off than it is to sand it off. But once this is completely dry and hardened, then you can use a sandpaper or a fingernail file and sand off the edges. On this one, I'm going to be using that green paper that you see there as like a cover on the spine part of it. It'll be a band, sort of. So it's going to overlap the napkin on both sides and also be wide enough to cover the space that I left for the spine to be, the thickness of it. So there's really not a measurement for this that I can give you. It all depends on how you do yours and how big your spine is. And the reason I'm doing this is that I like the look of it, to have a band on it, but it also kind of reinforces that spine a little bit, and it also reinforces the napkin that's on there just to give them a little bit more durability. So what I didn't necessarily like about this green is that it was a little too bright. So once I cut it, I use my Distress ink to kind of dull it down a little bit to make it more the color of those leaves that you see there on the page, so it would go with it better. While this green strip that I'm using is cardstock, it is a thin cardstock. So I chose that because if it's too thick, it combined with the thickness of the cover itself is going to make it too hard to put those creases in there to bend it. But yet it is still thick enough to use as a band for it. So there, I'm just showing you where I'm going to put it at, and use whatever glue you think holds best for paper glue to paper. And when you're putting it on the paper, I'm just daubing it on there right now because that bottle's just about empty, so it's easier to get it out that way. But if you have one that squirts it out, then of course that's better than what I'm doing here. But once you get the glue on there, put something under it that you don't care for glue getting on, and then rub the glue around so that it covers the inside part of it, but it also covers those edges and those corners, because you don't want an edge or a corner popping up that didn't get glue underneath it. So rub it on there as good as you can. Make sure you've got enough, but try not to have an excess, because when you press it on there, it'll just seep out the side. And not that that's a horrible thing, it's just that then you're going to have to clean that up. So once you have it ready and you're putting it on there, make sure that you've got it lined up so that the center of it is in the center of the spine. And then that should give you the same distance on each side. And that part is what's going to show on the front and the back of the book. So the entire spine will be covered. And this one is about 1.5 inches wide. And that spine is about 1/4 inch thick. So it covers it and then leaves the same amount on each side, front and back, that will be showing when the book is closed. And now I'm going to cut that little edge off, and it's a good idea to leave just a little bit, like cut your strip a little longer than you need it, so that you don't end up with one that isn't quite long enough. And then once I cut that off, while the glue is still wet, you press it down as good as you can, but then reinforce those creases, because doing that to it makes those creases kind of want to go away. So you need to make sure that they're back where they need to be. So just find the fold that you made and press it, and try to get it as pressed as you can all the way across so you have your good smooth fold back. So do that on the front and the back of the cover. And you could actually, with this cardstock, if you had a piece of material that you wanted to use to make the cover, you could use fabric glue and glue the material down to the whole thing. And then you wouldn't need to do what I'm doing here, because your material would cover the spine and the front and the back. And if you cut it long enough and left enough on each side, you could also wrap it around like I did this napkin and have it be the inside covers also. So there's so many different things that you can use to make the cover. Or if you don't want to use a napkin and you don't want to use fabric, there I'm aging it around the edges of it, and I do that to the whole book, edges, inside and outside, front and back. That is a step that is something I choose to do because I like that look, but if you would like for yours to have a cleaner, crisper look, then I would not use it if it were me. Here I'm showing you how I decorate one page. This is going to be the center of that signature, that group of pages that I have put together. it will be in the center of it. So I want those two pages to coordinate with each other and look right together. So I've already done this on the left-hand side, and I put it over some words that were there from that book page. And that really looks good when you do it that way, because the words show through, but they're kind of muted underneath the napkin and whatever the picture is on the napkin. But on this side, I'm actually going to put a pocket in there. And the pocket is made out of vellum, I think. You're seeing it there. So it's semi-transparent. So whatever I do underneath it is going to an extent, show through. And if it weren't going to, I wouldn't even be doing this step if it was just a solid pocket. But since you can see through it, I wanted something under there just for visual purposes. And to make that page coincide with the other page there next to it. And so I'm doing the same thing that I did with the cover. I'm just gluing that down. And what you won't see me doing is taking it to my hairdryer and drying it. And now for this page of vellum, it's got a little flap on the top of it, except that it doesn't flap. So I wanted to sew a piece of lace on there, and that's just for looks. It wasn't that it actually needed it. I just wanted it to have that on there. And then I also sew that page back over the lace again. I sew the top to that book page. And then I'll also sew the left side of that pocket and the bottom of that pocket. What I don't sew is the right side, because on it I'm going to use it as a pocket as well. So as you see there, with me sliding those old pictures in there, you can put one in the top and you can also put one in from the side. But the other side and the bottom are sewn onto the book. And these are the pages that I'm putting in that one signature. So that one's going to make, in that one, it'll be 4 pages. Of course, when you fold that, that becomes 8 pages, front and back. So those pages you could put in the book without doing what I'm going to do next. But what I'm going to do to that is sew down the center so that those pages stay together. And I don't know if you can see that little brown line there, but I used my distress ink to rub against the crease of that. I folded it backwards and made a line there. And that line helps a lot when you're sewing to make sure that you keep your stitch straight as you go down through there. And this kind of adds to the visual effect of it, but more than anything, it keeps those pages from sliding up and down if some pages are shorter than others. It keeps them exactly where you want them at. So do that, or like I said, you can skip this stage altogether. If you don't have a sewing machine, you don't have to do this. It's not necessary. And one of the downsides to doing this is that down the road you cannot remove, once you've sewn it, you cannot remove those pages, like pull one out and do something to it and put it back in, or take it out completely and put another one in its place. Once it's sewn in there, it's in there. There are several different things that I am using the sewing machine for to sew. So that was one of them, and then sewing the pages together was another. But there are a couple other things that I do sew. And I'm going to show you one of the others and then actually show you me sewing it. But then there's also another one that I sew that I add some lace onto that I don't show. And again, that's just to try to save time. So this leaf is one that I pressed using rust water. I did nothing to the color of it. That's when I pressed it, that's what it did. And then I dipped it in the rust water and it made it look like that. And then that's just a clear sticker that goes over the top of it. And I just put that on there because this is for a mother's journal. So because those pages that I press the leaf on are pretty thin, I put a piece of cardstock in between. And what you could do at this point is just glue those three to each other. But I wanted to add this little piece of ribbon or lace at the bottom of it. And the best way to do that would be sewing, although it can be glued also. But since I was going to sew that, I decided just to sew the whole thing together. So that's what I'm showing here, is putting that piece of lace in there, or ribbon in there, and then sewing it. And then I also aged around it a little bit. And once I had it sewn all the way around, I used a hole punch and punched a hole in it. And then I put some of those little hole reinforcement stickers on it. You know, it's like in a circle, but it has the hole in the middle of it and reinforces the hole that's been punched in the paper. But when you buy those, they come white. So of course I used my Distress ink and rubbed it over them while they were still on their package, so that they would look old also. And then because I put the hole there, or the reason for putting the hole there, was because one of the strings that I'm going to use to bind this book together, I'm leaving it a little bit longer so that I can attach this bookmark to it. And then whoever is using it can mark the page that they're on. So that's the finished product. I really love that leaf, and I will be showing how to do those, how to make so many different leaves show their images in a future video. I chose that leaf because it resembles the leaves on those roses there, but it is not a rose leaf itself. It's actually a honeysuckle vine leaf. But it works for that, so I decided to use it there. Okay, so now I'm showing you how I'm going to put that in the book. And that particular one is going to be the page that you see when you open it up. It'll be that one. And then the other signature will be in the back, and that's the other signature. So I've done some stenciling there and some stamping. I have stamps and stencils both that I used. And then this page that I took out here, that's actually a page out of a teacher's grading book. And then it's got some writing stamped over on one side of it, and that piece of paper that I just took out, I'm going to glue it down to the inside and then put this lace there, and that's going to be a pocket also on each side. It'll be a side pocket that you can stick something in. So I didn't show sewing that, but that's another way to get a pocket in there. Okay, so I chose, this is just a torn bed sheet that was dyed a light pink color and antiqued a little bit. And that's what I'm using to tie that signature of pages into the book. And it really is just that simple. You just put it in there and wrap the string around it and tie it closed. And while you're tying, try to make sure that the string stays up there on your spine. So see how mine was trying to go down there? Get it up there on your spine if you have a spine. If you didn't put any width to your spine, then it's going to stay there anyway. So once you have it in place, then tie it off. Always do 2 knots in it, so use something pretty thin, you know, that doesn't have a lot of thickness to it. But always do 2 knots just to hold that in place. And that's the book with the first signature in there. So I have the one more signature that's going to go in behind that. Okay, and these are some of the different types of paper that I used. I used a lot of book pages. That page there in the center where I have sewn the lace onto the edges of it, that is the teacher's gradebook page. I also used just like a brown paper. You can use paper from so many different things. If you look around, anything that when you fold it in half is big enough for the journal that you're going to make, even if it has writing on it, even if a person has written on it. You can either choose to leave that as it is, or you can make that be a spot where you add an embellishment to cover it up with, or to mute it down even. So when you start thinking about the different pages that you can use, there truly are a lot of them. The one thing that you would be the most limited on is if you did a full-size junk journal, then sometimes that ends up being some pretty big sheets of paper that you have to have because they would be folded in half. But when you do these mini ones, then it opens up a whole different area of papers that you can use. So the string that I'm going to use for this signature is also that pink tone, but it's actually a window sheer curtain that was torn into strips. So it's thinner, and so then in the end there'll be two strings there, and although they'll be the same color, they are different textures. And I like, if you're having to use more than one string, I like for them to go well together but look a little different. So this shows the string. It's more transparent than the other one. The other one is cotton and this one is not, because it's like a window sheer. So I tie those together, and something that I did not show in this video but you'll see at the end is that I added a couple little charms onto one of these strings. One is a key and the other one is a heart with a keyhole in it. I felt like that was appropriate for a mother's journal that she's going to be giving to her child, to let her child know that that child holds the key to her heart. So at this stage, we are just about finished with this book. I will be going through it and showing you the different pages and telling you what I did there. But the majority of the work is done, and it still needs a title on it. And for the title, I used my Dymo machine. I have one of those that connects to your computer and you can just print labels off with it. And I had some labels that were for file folders, so they're real narrow, and that made the perfect label to print off. And then it's sticky on the back, so I just glued it onto another piece of paper that I aged and made a little title for the front of that book. Making this whole book from start to finish took me about 2 hours to do, and I used the hairdryer to dry things so I wasn't having to wait in between. But actual work time, it takes about 2 hours. Like you will see in this, on these pages as I show you through them, I did not do a lot of embellishments on it. And there I'm showing you one of those side pockets on that center page, and there's one on the other side also, so it's just extra places that you can stick something. And there's back to that front page. And there's a book with the title on it and the little charms there on the side. And then I punched holes in the front cover and the back cover, making sure that they lined up with each other so that I could put a string through there to hold the book closed. So you can see I also used that reinforcement on those holes. I did it on those there too, and that's a music sheet, gospel music, and that's the brown piece of paper that I used, and it was rather thin, so I had to glue two together for it. And then all I did to that was just add that little Bible quote to the top of those words. But there's room there on each of those to do journaling, and also room to store things. So the mother who's using this book could store letters that the child has written her during their childhood days, or write a letter to that child and put it in one of these little pockets, or put a picture of herself and that child in the pockets. There's so many different things that you could do with this, things that you can store in there, and you still kind of get a peek of it. That's actually my mom and two of her brothers there, and then the one in the back was my mom and her dad. There's another pocket, and that's a library card pocket. And all I did to that was age it a little bit and stamp that rose on it. And then that page there is the other side to the one I showed you before, and I folded the corner down and then just rubbed that distress ink across it just to help it look a little aged and give it a little character. Okay, and this one on the right side is a page that I embellished. And I have a machine. It's a Sizex, and it has one of those little things in there to do embellishments with, and that's how I did that. And that's something that I just, it was a transfer that I used on it. And that says love down the left-hand side, and that was with a stamp. And then that piece of paper is just so the mother can title that page. The number 3 is just a random number, just something to decorate it with. So I'm trying through the whole book to kind of coordinate colors, even if, it's not roses all the way through it. It is colors that coordinate and go together. I really hope that you'll try some of these rust impressions using rust water and leaf, because they are absolutely gorgeous when they're done. So there's some more of that napkin. I just used all my scrap pieces of napkin and did that. Those pieces I cut off of because it was too long. I used them in the book. And that's a recipe. That's for making white bread. So if you're doing a recipe book, that's a good way to do that. And then instead of using roses or stamps that have to do with the mother's journal, you can use stamps or pictures that have to do with cooking. So please let me know what you think about this book. And if you would still like me to do some others showing things you can use for certain other ones, then I will gladly do that. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a blessed and wonderful day.